Welcome, everyone, to another edition of White Horse Live, coming to you live from White Horse Black Mountain, and we're allowed to say it now. This evening is the 32nd episode of White Horse Live, hosted as always by Bob Hinkle and co-produced by White Horse Black Mountain and Rad House Studio. Tonight we welcome pianist Daniel Weiser to the White Horse stage. He's joined by flutist Lee Kibler. There is no fixed ticket price for online viewing of this program. Instead, for those of you who are watching online tonight, we ask that you pay what you can. For those who are here in the audience tonight in person, thank you so much for being here. Now more than ever, our artists need you. And if you're watching online, they rely on your tips. They can't hear your applause if you're watching online, and your tips are the way to show your appreciation for them. The best way to do that is to visit whitehorselive.tips in your web browser. Not .com, not tips.com, just whitehorselive.tips. And we'll display the tip jar address from time to time on screen during the online show. Thank you for helping make this series a success. We are grateful for your help in spreading the word. Please keep sharing the event notices, hosting those live watch parties, and telling all your friends. Now here's your host, Bob Hinkle.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? When the song rises up, white horses will fill the mountains. When song rises up, then the clouds roll away. If you don't believe that music has power, stay right here with us for just about an hour. Daniel and Leah, they're going to lift you up. They're going to loosen up your tighten, and they will fill your cup. When the song rises up, white horses will fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. The clouds roll away, then the clouds, they roll away. Glad to have you here this evening. I think you're going to enjoy this one. And thanks for being with us here out there in Couchland. It's a pleasure just to live stream for you. AmiciMusic is the company that Dr. Weiser started, and it means music between friends. The company has, as a part of its mission, to bring world-class music to places where it usually isn't heard, like White Horse Black Mountain, the former Chevrolet dealership. For 11 years now, founder and artistic director, Dr. Daniel Weiser, has brought White Horse the best in post-Corvette chamber music. Tonight's program is certainly no exception. It's called Flute, Fugue, and Tango, featuring Dr. Weiser on piano and Leah Kibler, a truly wonderful flautist. Is it flutist? Is it flute player? Is it fluter? Let's say it's flutier. How's that? We'll hear from composers Johann Sebastian Bach, Schnitke, Piazzolla, and Yashinko. As the gossip columnist of the composers, Dr. Weiser will also impart little-known, sometimes tantalizingly compromising, stories about the composers, all in an evening of wonderful music with a bit of juicy, if slightly outdated, gossip. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and dogs, guppies and goldfish, and all other couch sitters out there, please, a warm, virtual White Horse Live round of applause for the man of few words, Dr. Daniel Weiser.
Thank you. It's the sound of real applause. That really feels good. It's wonderful to be back here at the White Horse. Thank you to Bob Hinkle for everything he does to keep music alive during this period and well before that in this wonderful place that we call the White Horse. Thank you to Rebecca from Rad House Studios for making this live stream possible. Hopefully you're all watching on a live stream, but we also have some very few people here that are allowed as a live audience, and it's been almost 7 months now since we've actually been able to perform for any kind of audience. I do a lot of online things, but to hear real applause, it's fantastic. So I thank you all for being here in person and for being out there on the online. And we hope you can support this concert through your tips at whitehorselive.tips. I am Dan Weiser, the founder, artistic director of AmiciMusic, Music Among Friends, now in our 11th year of existence. And we're always happy when flautist Lee Kibler can join us Lee is a North Carolina native, lives now right here in Asheville, but she's performed all over the place. I'll give you a little bit on her bio here on my phone. She's been hailed as bewitching and unforgettable, a top drawer flutist, which she is. As formerly a member of the Florida Philharmonic Orchestra and the Florida Grand Opera Orchestra, toured as principal flutist of the Moscow Chamber Orchestra when they were here, has appeared at the Spoleto Festival, the Norfolk Chamber Music Festival, among others, a graduate of the Yale University School of Music, and a recipient of the coveted Yale Alumni Prize. She is now on the faculty of Clemson University and has won numerous grants for her fantastic playing. So really happy to have Lee here, and she put together most of this program. We knew that we wanted to start with this piece by Johann Sebastian Bach, who actually we think it's by Johann Sebastian Bach. We're not actually fully certain of that. And then the rest of the program is going to sort of be composers who were very much influenced by Bach, although most of them in the 20th century. People like Astor Piazzolla, the great tango writer, Claude Bolling, who did this wonderful crossover between jazz and piano, jazz and classical music in the 1970s. So you'll hear the spirit of Bach hovering above us through this concert, we hope. This first piece that we're going to do, we think was written by Bach in 1736, when he was the organist at the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig. We don't know for sure. The only extant copy we have is in the handwriting of his son, but often his son would write out pieces for him. But it's not the more intellectually dense side of Bach that sometimes we think of with his fugues. This is more what we call the galant style, a little bit later Bach, where he was sort of more into melody and simple harmonies. But it's a delightful piece in 3 movements. Bach was very modest about himself. He once said, "I did work hard, but anyone who works as hard as I did could achieve the same results. All you have to do is press down the right keys and the right pedals at the right time, and the music will play itself." Not always the case, but a true genius, and so many composers have looked back to Bach as their guide into the world of music. Chopin once said, "Bach was like an astronomer who, with the help of ciphers, found the most wonderful stars." Claude Debussy, looking back at Bach, said, "Bach is a benevolent God to which all musicians should offer a prayer to defend themselves against mediocrity." And Robert Schumann maybe said it the best. He said, "Music owes as much to Bach as any religion to its founder. Studying Bach makes us realize that we are all idiots." We wanted to start us off with this beautiful piece. It's in 3 movements. We have a fast, light first movement with this is, of course, written for harpsichord. It has a very light little beginning for a harpsichord solo, and then a wonderful dialogue with the flute. They're very equal parts, which is wonderful for this. The second movement is much more for the flute. It's called a Siciliano, a very beautiful, slow, minor melody. And then the third movement back to the more dance-like, joyous quality. So please put your hands together and welcome our featured artist today, Miss Lee Kibler on flute. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope you got a little taste of the wonderful genius of Bach, who puts it all of us at ease with just the simplicity, but the genuineness of his music. We're going to jump ahead all the way till 1972, but it certainly doesn't sound like it when you hear most of this piece. This is the Suite in the Olden Style by Alfred Schnittke, a Russian composer, Russian-German. And for the first, there are 5 little movements to this piece. The first 4, you could almost sort of be back in Bach's time. You wouldn't even know a couple little added notes that give it a little 20th century harmony. Only in the last movement do we get a little taste of kind of the dissonance right at the very end to that piece that Schnittke wanted to say, actually, I am part of this 20th century. Schnittke himself was born in 1934. He would die in 1998. His father had actually been born, a Jewish born in Germany, and had come over to the Soviet Union in the 1920s as a translator. He could speak Russian and German. But then he actually ends up going back to Vienna with the family when Schnittke is a young child. And it's actually in Vienna where Schnittke gets his first training as a pianist. And that time in Vienna would always stick with him. He said, I felt every moment there to be a link of the historical chain. All was multidimensional. The past represented a world of ever-present ghosts, and I was not a barbarian without any connections, but the conscious bearer of the task in my life. So he understood that he needed to be a musician and that he had to sort of follow in the footsteps of all the great composers, Bach and then Mozart and Beethoven, who of course exuded their presence there in Vienna. He then goes back to Moscow, graduates from the Moscow Conservatory in 1960s, and begins working on symphonies, but he does not have an easy time. He actually, much of his music is very dissonant and out there, and the Soviet people, the authorities, did not really appreciate his music, and in fact, at some point, he was banned from leaving the USSR because of his music. But what he was able to do was earn his living composing film scores, which a lot of these Russian composers did. Shostakovich did a lot of that as well. He composed actually over 70 scores, and the music that you're going to hear today is actually originally from 2 different movies that he made. The first one in 1965 had a great title. It was called Adventures of a Dentist. Amazingly, he got in trouble for this film. It's hard to believe that a film about a dentist's life could be that bad, but apparently there was some issues of this film. And he also did a film called Sport, Sport, Sport in 1970 about a young girl gymnast. And the third and fourth movements that you're going to hear were taken out of that. The first, second, and fifth were actually from this other movie. And then, he put these all together originally for violin and harpsichord, but we have had them translated here for flute. And he developed this technique he called polystylism, where he sort of went back and took different styles from different eras and kind of mushed them together, juxtaposing them all. He said, "The goal of my life is to unify serious music and light music, even if I break my neck in doing so." And that's part of what we're trying to do in this concert, is to show the seriousness of Bach, but how it develops into tango and jazz, that it's all part of the same continuum. Interestingly, sadly, he actually had a stroke at the end of his life and lost the use of his right hand. But he was in the process of writing his Ninth Symphony. And those of you who know, the Ninth Symphony is sort of the big number after Beethoven. And all these composers want to write 9 symphonies. He finishes it, but then he dies. And unfortunately, most of it is illegible because he wrote with his left hand. So there's actually been several people who have tried to go back and figure out what Schnittke was trying to write, but they can barely make out his music. Apparently there's been several different attempts at it. I don't know if any of them are perfect, but it's kind of a sad ending to his life. There's a wonderful quote about this, the music, that it sounds very archaic and old, but Peter Warlock once said, "Music is neither old nor modern. It is either good or bad music, and the date at which it was written has no significance whatsoever. All old music was modern once, and much more of the music of yesterday already sounds more old-fashioned than works which were written 3 centuries ago. All good music, whatever its date, is ageless, as alive and significant today as it was when it was written." So we hope you will enjoy a little of this Alfred Schnittke, the suite in the old style, again, written for harpsichord and violin originally, but we have it on piano and flute. Welcome back, Lee Kibler. I did forget to mention that the very end of this piece, you will barely know it doesn't really feel like it ends. It just sort of stops. So we'll get up, but you can applaud at that point. wonderful work of Alfred Schnittke. Feels like a moment where the record player just stops in the middle of that, and poor Lee has to hold that note for 8 minutes while I'm playing underneath it. But just fascinating character. But if you look up Schnittke, you can hear some really crazy, very modern dissonant music, and then you can hear this. So he really just explored all sorts of different styles in his writing. An interesting composer. All right, we're going to move now to a composer you would not sort of think you would equate with Bach in this era, but Astor Piazzolla, who I play quite a lot. He did for the tango, I think, what Gershwin did for jazz, bringing it into our classical world so that we didn't have to go into the bars to see the tango. It sort of became music we could listen to in a concert hall. And a lot of that is due to Piazzolla and his determination to just keep playing this music. Piazzolla was born in 1921 and would die in 1992. And although he was born in Argentina, his parents emigrated when he was a young boy to New York City. They lived down in Greenwich Village, actually, for several years when Piazzolla was growing up. And it was actually there that Piazzolla got his first bandoneon for his 8th birthday. The bandoneon being that accordion-like instrument with buttons that he would become sort of the master of, and was the music, the sound of tango. But this is how Piazzolla remembered that birthday gift. He said, "My first bandoneon was a gift from my father when I was 8 years old. He brought it covered in a box, and I was very happy because I thought it was the roller skates I had asked for so many times. It was a letdown because instead of a pair of skates, I found an artifact I had never seen before in my life. Dad sat down, set it on my legs, and said to me, 'Astor, this is the instrument of tango. I want you to learn it.' My first reaction was anger. Tango was that music he listened to almost every night after coming home from work, and I didn't like it. But he soon began taking piano lessons, actually, with a neighbor who lived just next to them, a guy named Bela Vilda, who actually had come over from Russia and had studied with Rachmaninoff when he was in Russia. So he was a good pianist, and he got Piazzolla very interested in the music of Bach. This is how Piazzolla remembered meeting Vilda. He said, "We lived in a very long house, and there at the back, beyond a courtyard, was a window. And from there, the sound of a piano could be heard. It hypnotized me. I stood still beside it. Later, I came to know it was a piece by Bach, and that the pianist practiced it 9 hours a day. His name was Bela Vilda, and he soon became my teacher. My father and I knocked at his door. When he opened it, I was bewildered by his grand piano and the pack of Camel cigarettes he used to smoke. I thought how nice it would be to grow up and be able to play the piano and smoke cigarettes. Mom had no money, but because she worked as a manicurist, she agreed to take care of his hands in exchange for lessons, and twice a week she would bring him a dish of gnocchi or ravioli. My teacher really loved pasta." And so he had this wonderful relationship with Vilda, begins playing piano, and then he learns all the Bach well-tempered fugue, the preludes and fugues, and he then, Piazzolla does, translates it onto the bandoneon, which is a very difficult thing to do. He could play all of Bach on the bandoneon. He then decides to go back, the family moves back when he's about 17 years old to Buenos Aires. And he begins working in some of the tango bars and playing the tango, but he wants to infuse tango with a little modern life. And partly that's a little jazz, but also actually it's going back to Bach and putting in these little classical riffs in the tango. But the tango musicians didn't really like it. As a saying in Buenos Aires, if you want to change the tango, you had better learn boxing or some other martial art. And in fact, actually, Piazzolla did box for a little bit. I think he actually lost to Rocky Graziano at some point in his life. So he was a boxer, but he wasn't going to change the tango on his own. And he sort of gave up for a while, and he began to write more classical music. And in fact, he wrote a symphony in 1953 called the Buenos Aires Symphony, which won a big prize and got him sent to Paris. But there was a near riot at the premiere of that piece because in the orchestra, he had parts for 2 bandoneons. Now, these highfalutin classical people thought of the bandoneon was a low-class instrument that did not belong in a symphony orchestra. So there were a lot of people angry about that. He ultimately gets over to Paris with this award, and he studies with Nadia Boulanger, the great pedagogue. And there's a great story he writes about meeting Boulanger, and he said, "When I met her, I showed her my kilos of symphonies and sonatas. She started to read them and came out with a horrible sentence. They're very well written." And then she stopped with a big period round like a soccer ball. After a long while, she said, "In this piece, you sound like Stravinsky. Here you're like Bartok. Here you're like Ravel. But you know what happens? I can't find Piazzolla in any of this." So she began to investigate my private life, what I did and did not play, if I was single, married, living with someone. She was like an FBI agent. And I was ashamed to tell her that I was a tango musician. Finally, I said, "I play in a nightclub." I didn't want to say cabaret. And she answered, "Nightclub, mais oui, but that is a cabaret, isn't it?" "Yes," I answered, and I thought I would have to hit this woman in the head with a radio. It was so hard to lie to her. She kept asking, "You say that you're not a pianist. What instrument do you play then?" I didn't want to tell her I was a bandoneon player because I thought she might throw me from the 4th floor window. Finally, I confessed, and she asked me to play some bars of a tango that I had written. She suddenly opened her eyes, took my hand, and said to me, "You idiot, that's Piazzolla." So I took all the music I had composed 10 years of my life and sent it to hell in 2 seconds. So he does decide to go back to Argentina. There's a little bit of an opening now for this kind of nuevo tango, as it was called, mixing up these different styles. He's still not all that popular in Argentina, but he begins to travel in Europe. He's very popular in Germany, and then ultimately into the United States in the 70s and 80s, where he begins to write more and more of these tangos that are picked up by musicians such as Yo-Yo Ma and others to perform. He later in life said, "I still can't believe that some pseudo-critics continue to accuse me of having murdered tango. They have it backwards. They should look at me as the savior of tango. I merely performed plastic surgery on it." So he really did help, I believe, modernize tango, bring it out to the world. And this piece that we're going to do was written in 1972. It's called Fugue y Misterio, the mysterious fugue. And there's a few parts to it. There's the first part, this is very much Bach related, this very wonderful fugue that he writes. Then we get more of the down and dirty tango. The tango always has to have that kind of dirty, ugly, abrasive quality to it. And then there's a slow part in the middle. Piazzolla always puts a little slow part in. And the slow part is actually from an opera that he had written a few years earlier called Maria de Buenos Aires. Was not a successful opera. It's a kind of a surreal libretto about a woman, Maria, who basically lives in the slums and is killed, and then basically comes back to life or has a child. It's not clear whether it's her who's come back. It's a sort of a messiah kind of imagery, but all set in the 1960s with a lot of drugs going on as well. It didn't do well, but the music was phenomenal from it, and so you'll hear the slow part of that is gorgeous, and then back comes the tango to finish this up. So here is Astor Piazzolla's Fugue y Misterio. Thank you, little Astor Piazzolla. All right, now, this next composer I know next to nothing about. This is a piece that when we were looking for something fun to do, Lee said, have you ever heard of this guy, Taras Yakchenko? And I said, God bless you. No, sorry. The Yakchenko is apparently a Ukraine, or was, sadly, he apparently died 2 years ago at a very early age, only about in his 50s. But he put out his music on this free website, and some of it is just absolutely beautiful, all kind of connecting the lighter side of music with the classical side. So we're going to do two of his works, one called Adieu Tango, Goodbye Tango, to connect us to the Piazzolla, and then another one, a Petite Valse, which sort of brings us to Paris and a wonderful waltz-like jazz feel to it. All I could find is that he was born in 1964 in Ukraine, into a musical family, and then ultimately graduates from the Tchaikovsky Conservatory there in Kiev, but does most of his work in Munich. Goes back into to Germany there. And again, the only way I know he died, there was a little face on his Facebook page. It went silent a couple years ago, and then somebody posted a memorial concert to him. So a great loss, I think, because I think you see there was a lot of spirit in his music. So here are two pieces by Taras Yakchenko. First, the Adieu Tango, and then the Petite Valse. heard that little tune at the end. That's the Ode du lieber Augustin, a very famous Viennese little lilting song with a kind of dark story behind it. It took place in the plague back in the 17th century when supposedly this bagpiper gets buried alive and is only being heard by playing that tune. But it's a lovely little touch at the end. All right, we're now going to go to a beautiful tune that was actually just written last year in 2019 by a composer named Samuel Ziman. He wrote this for a flute player commissioned by Cindy Ann Braz for one of the big flute convention conferences, probably the last one that took place before the pandemic. This was commissioned by Cindy Braz for her mother, who had passed away. And so Ziman wrote this Canción de Cuna, a lullaby, a song of a baby, with these little Mexican folk music in it. But in the middle, it builds to this incredible climax. And to me, it's sort of remembering, feeling the grief of the death, remembering those good moments and the power of her mother's spirit. But then at the end, sort of the sadness comes back as you sort of realize that she's never going to come back. Ziman was born, actually, in Mexico City, and has worked on lots of different films, has been professor at the Juilliard School for many years, known for some really more complicated flute pieces with a lot of rhythmic intensity and craziness. But every once in a while, he goes back to his kind of folkloric roots. He's also Jewish. Every once in a while, you get a little Jewish tinge in there as well. But a lot of this Latin American sound comes in. He actually wrote the score for a modern dance piece back in 2018 called Sacrificio with a Colombian choreographer, and that was in celebration of the peace accord that was signed between the government of Colombia and the rebels down there. The music sort of came about, and then he's also been very influential in the orchestras for young people in Mexico City. It's called Esperanza Azteca, and he wrote a whole long piece with Yo-Yo Ma playing it as well. That's become sort of the anthem for those people. So this is a very gorgeous piece. I hope you enjoy the Canción de Cuna, just written in 2019 by Samuel Ziman. Thank you very much. Just a reminder, if you're watching at home, please help support live music. Support us musicians, support Bob Hinkle and the White Horse, support Rat House Studios, all working together here to try to make some wonderful music. There's lots of great things coming up at the White Horse, so go to whitehorselive.tips and give freely to help your musicians and the culture. It's going to be a tough time, I think, for several more months to come. But we're going to be back. In fact, I'll be back here at the White Horse in November for a really special 3-concert extravaganza with Franklin Keel, wonderful cellist, assistant principal of the Asheville Symphony. He and I are going to play the complete works of Ludwig van Beethoven for cello and piano. It takes 3 concerts to get all of these pieces in, 5 sonatas and then several different variations that he wrote. So that will be November 12th, November 14th, and November 15th. We'll be here on the White Horse stage for all 3 of those. Again, you can check out the White Horse page or AmiciMusic.org as we get those concerts developed. But this is Beethoven's 250th birthday, and unfortunately he didn't get the celebrations he was supposed to get all summer because of the pandemic. So I'm working hard to play a lot of Beethoven in these last couple months. All wonderful works. Join us for that. And again, whitehorselive.tips for this concert. A huge thanks to Ali for doing all this wonderful music. We're going to finish with a few different movements from the Suite for Flute and Jazz Piano by the great Claude Bolling. He was my favorite composer as a young boy. Bolling sort of was the first of to really make a good crossover, I think. I mean, I guess George Gershwin was the real first to do jazz and classical music, but it's a very difficult thing to put those two together, jazz and an improvisatory art, classical music and art that you have to write down. But Bolling was able to sort of write down his wonderful jazz playing in a way that classical pianists could follow. And I can remember as a young boy when this the first suite came out in 1975, it actually stayed on the charts. How much is it? For 530 weeks it was on the Billboard Top 40. That's 10 years this piece was on the charts with Jean-Pierre Rampal playing the flute. And I can remember just playing along with it, thinking, wow, I can actually play jazz now. That's wonderful. So it was a great thing for a young classical kid to be able to do. But Bolling himself, I believe he's still alive. He was born in 1930, so he'd be about 90 years old now. Born in Caen in southern France, studied at the Nice Conservatory, and then went up to Paris. He was a child prodigy. By the time he was 14 years old, he was playing jazz piano professionally with people like Lionel Hampton and Kenny Clarke, and then really part of the big jazz revival in the late 1960s, became very good friends with the great pianist Oscar Peterson. Wrote music for over 100 films, so like Schnittke, including To Catch a Spy and California Suite, a lot of movies in the 70s. And he actually followed up the flute suite, which was so successful, with a couple other ones. There was a violin suite, which I did last year, a fantastic one, written for Pinka Zuckerman, and then a cello suite that he wrote for Yo-Yo Ma. And then in the late 1980s, he did a second suite for flute and jazz piano trio, which is not as well known, but the last piece we're going to do tonight is actually from that suite. It's the Vagabond from that suite. It's a very long piece, lasts about an hour if you're going to do the whole thing, but Lee and I did that here a couple of years ago. Wonderful work. He also was a big fan of Fats Walker, Errol Garner. When he was 16 years old, he had his own group called Les Parisiennes that played just after the war there in 1946 with a lot of New Orleans revival and bebop music. And he also made the first recording of Duke Ellington's big major work, Black, Brown, and Beige in 1989. So he's been influential not only for himself, but for bringing other great jazz musicians to life. But we in America know him less as a pure jazz musician, but more for these great crossovers. So you're going to hear first Baroque and Blue. I think you'll recognize that. That was the most famous, the first one from that first suite. And then a Fugace. Again, Claude Bolling always looked to Bach as his favorite man, and so you'll hear why in the Fugace as well as in the Vagabond. Here's music of Claude Bolling. Again, thank you for our live audience for being here and for giving us applause that we love to hear. Thank you for those on live stream, and after the show you can still go on to whitehorselive.tips and give some money. And thank you to Bob Hinkle for keeping the White Horse going. I don't know how he does it. It's still here, and we're thankful for that. One of the great music venues anywhere in this country. Thanks to Rebecca, also from Rat House Studios. Here's Claude Bolling. composer's note. This is supposed to be written for, there's supposed to be a bass player and a drummer, but we can't afford that, so it's just me doing this one.
Leah Kibler and Dr. Daniel Weiser, I got to tell you, there's some mighty fine playing there. Mighty fine. Now, you know, Bach is everywhere. It's not just, he's everywhere. I heard a story about a little boy who was in school learning about music, and he came home that night, and he was wide-eyed with excitement, and they're having a dinner that night with his parents and some of their friends. And his father said to him, "So, Johnny, what are you so excited about?" He said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'm in the 3rd grade, and we were studying about music. We studied about classical music." So, "Yeah, what'd you study?" "Well, we studied about Johann Sebastian Bach." "Well, what'd you study about it?" "Well, we learned that he had 22 children, and he practiced on the spinster upstairs." All right. When the song rises up, white horses fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Well, sisters, ain't you glad to feel that fear fading? And brothers, ain't you glad that there'll be a better day? People, ain't you glad all in this together? People, ain't you glad that the clouds gonna roll away? The clouds gonna roll away. Well, Daniel and Leah, they were the vessels here this time. Hope that you enjoyed it. Maybe had a glass of wine or two. Hope that you were able to let go of yourself. And we hope that we helped you take your joy down off the shelf when the song rises up. White horses will fill the mountains when the song rises up. Then the clouds roll away. Then the clouds roll away. Then the clouds roll away. Now, I thank you. I thank you, and whoever made my jeans, thanks you. Now, we've got a contest going on. It's called Between the Cushions. It's a worldwide contest. We're asking you, since you're there all the time anyway, sitting on your couch, we're asking you if you would kindly feel around and see what the most interesting thing you can come up with is, and send it to us. Send it to us, or you don't have to send the thing, especially some of the things, but just, send us a postcard or something. Tell us what you found. Now, that will continue, and we'll be having next episode next week. But tonight, I wanted to talk just a little more about the COVID-19, just what you wanted to hear, right? We all know how serious and dangerous it is. But to us here at White Horse Live, that doesn't mean that some fun can't be poked at it. For instance, the president is so economical. He's only worn one mask for a total of an hour in the last 6 months. He's got plenty left. He's a thrifty fella. However, there's a not so good thing about it, social distancing. What's so social about being 6 feet apart? You can't really shake hands. You can't hug. You can't kiss. And no part of your anatomy can reach out and touch someone unless the fella's especially gifted. So you all stay safe. Stay well, and for heaven's sake, don't touch your face. Good night now.
Thanks for joining us for White Horse Live. We hope you've enjoyed the show. And for those of you here in person, we hoped you enjoyed being back at White Horse. We hope that you're with us for dozens more years to come. This program is produced by White Horse Black Mountain and by Rad House Studio. Bob Hinkle is your host and executive producer. Claire Hoke is your audio engineer. Jessica Wharton is director of photography. Jessica Fox is key grip. Public relations services provided by Maggie Rainwater at Hoosier Devil. I'm Rebecca Hillgraves, director and producer for these programs. Join us this Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. for pianist David Troy Francis with soprano Simone Vigilante and cellist Franklin Keel, right here on White Horse Live. In the meantime, Be good to each other.